So, let's first of all talk about what I mean when I use the term self. The self is essentially the I that you feel is located inside the skull, between the ears and behind the eyes, the thinker of thoughts, the feeler of feelings, and the experiencer of experience. This is supposed to be the real you. The implication of having this self is the feeling of being only a little isolated fragment, rattling around, confused and afraid in an alien universe. But here's the thing. The self is nothing other than a persistent neurological and psychological illusion. And it is constantly being reinforced and refined by our culture and our society. With the aid of our parents, our peers, teachers, and whatnot. All our social institutions are based on the concept of the individual, and it is even more strengthened by the very language we use. But the truth of the matter is that there is no self, or ego, if you will. It's just an illusion, a collective hallucination which is the main reason for most of human suffering. The self, known as the ego in the East, cannot be dispelled by preaching or meditating or doing yoga, as is so often claimed in the Indian traditions of spirituality. You can, however, whilst meditating or taking LSD, get a glimpse of this selfless state, what is commonly known as cosmic consciousness, the feeling of oneness with the universe. But that feeling, or the glimpse of that feeling, isn't permanent at all. It doesn't eradicate the problem, and even though I may be able to convince you intellectually that there is no self, you'll still feel as if there is, on an emotional level. Therefore, it won't have any real impact on the illusion at all. Now, if you go out on a quest for annihilation of the self by all sorts of techniques and gimmicks and spiritual disciplines, as those mentioned above, you'll make the illusion even stronger. For isn't the attempt or the desire to get rid of the self just a stronger manifestation of it? That's the self or ego trying to get rid of itself. And that's like running in a long and futile circle. And speaking of that, there is no self, so why are you so desperately trying to get rid of it? It can't be done. So, what if we, by introspection, take a look at this I, our so-called self? If you're listening carefully to my voice, do you notice any I separate from the reading? In a second after I asked you this, you suddenly thought, yes, I sense an I, but this is not true. First, you were reading. The only thing happening at the same time was reading, the experience of reading. Then, when I made you aware of the question, your mind switched to I am reading, and this happens so quickly, or it alternates so quickly, that you don't notice it. But it's true. Whenever you are engaged in something, like, for example, reading, or dancing, or whatever, when you're really into it, there is no I next to the experience. There is only the experience. The I is just another thought. There is only experience, but man equipped with a phenomenal ability to remember, and also being equipped with self-consciousness, splits himself into two. He kids himself into thinking he is something separate to experience and the world, that he is some kind of a observer aside from the world, because he can recognize himself in a mirror and think about thinking and reflect on everything that he sees and hears. It's like a feedback mechanism, but obviously, when you go into the details, this is clearly not true. You are not a separate observer without any relation to the universe. You are one of the billions of lights through which the entire universe watches itself. I am just as connected to the planet as the trees, and just as much connected to the universe as the stars. Only by name and convention can I be separated from everything else. Now, when you think about it, consciousness seems static. You feel that the world around you changes at such a fast rate, and a much faster rate than you do. So you feel like a mirror by which the world passes, and then you get the feeling of being a separate observer. But the crux of the matter is that consciousness is in constant change, just like your body. If it wasn't, it couldn't be, because you're constantly generating new thoughts, emotions, and sensations, such as itching, freezing, or feeling too hot, or etc. It's never still. It's always in motion. You're just not aware of it. Your body too, even though it has a specific form, is in a constant motion. Cells are always in action, synapses are firing constantly, and whatnot. So when you say, I have a feeling, you should rather say, there is a feeling present. If you have a thought is here, a thought is present. But you might object and say, if there is no self, how then can I, for example, get out of something like being afraid? To which I would respond, there is no I doing that. You have fear, then it subsides to a different feeling. And if you find a thought to get out of fear, a thought that inspires action, then that's just another thought that pops up based on your memory of having experienced the same situation before. Because memory plays a big part in this illusion. It works as the glue that keeps everything intact. The memory is the system that keeps reminding you about your fake persona. I'm John Doe, or Jane Doe, or whomever. So it all began after you were born. You were given a name, you had experiences that formed your personality, but that's not the real you. That's something superficial, something secondary. What I'd like to know is who you are behind the facade of convention. Hypochondria, which is the term used for describing people who suffer from so-called illness anxiety, people who always suspect that they are ill or will become ill, and essentially is all about mistrust. They do not trust their own bodies, and so they go out of their way to control it, and that's obviously futile. When the aim is to survive, and you are ironically killing yourself by not living, you are just existing in an anxious haze, day and night, without ever enjoying your life. And I find this disorder suitable to our relation to the universe. We do not trust it. We feel like strangers in it, and aside from it. And so we come to fear death, and illness, and the world in general. We try to gain control, but the harder we try, the more we lose. Because the more you let go of this so-called control, the more you get. Because now you trust the universe as you trust yourself, and you are open, and you are accepting. Because deep, deep down, you are the universe. As in the famous words of Rumi, you are not a drop in the ocean, you are the entire ocean in a drop. And when you surrender and realize that there is no self, no separate you also awake to reality, that the universe is just an extension of your own body, that death is not something to be afraid of, but that death is just an interval in the energy stream of the cosmos. You'll come and go. Now you see me, now you don't. Like day and night, summer and winter, again and again, in a new form each time. And of course, there won't be any personal continuation of Jane Doe, or whatever your name is, in terms of her memories or personality. But you will start once again from scratch, and so it goes with everything. For when the lines of convention is broken, there is no separation between your body and everything else. Your body, the real you, is everything that there is. The sun is as central and just as important in the description of my organism as my heart is, and the atmosphere just as vital as my lungs. It all goes together. So then, the question arises, what must be done in order to wake up and realize that there is no self, no little you separate from the world, on a emotional level? Well, the question itself is part of the illusion of you wanting to transcend the I, but it is still the I trying to transcend itself. And it is the problem. So by trying, you're just playing the same game. You're just kidding yourself. What you do is, you start by watching everything that goes on inside and outside. And you discover that the mental chatter within the skull, such as your thoughts, your feelings, and so on, becomes one with all the sounds out there. The sounds of birds, of rain, and of basically everything you can see and hear. That is all one process, and you are that process. You don't try, you just watch and listen, and you realize that every time you experience this self-sensation, it's just another thought. That's acceptance, and that's awakening to your true self, which is everything and everyone.